Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into something that, well, it touches every single one of us. How we handle disagreements with the people closest to us.
Hmm.
Our partners, our families, our friends. We've been digging through a really fascinating collection of research all about these conflict dynamics.
Yeah,
And our mission basically is to cut through the jargon, pull out the most vital insights, and give you a clearer picture of the subtle, sometimes kind of surprising ways conflict shows up in your own life.
that's right. And conflict, it isn't just like a minor thing in close relationships. It's persistent. It's significant.
Right.
Think about it. Partner, parent, sibling, best friend,
Right.
disagreements, they just happen. And even with more and more research, we're still learning so much, not just about getting through conflict, but maybe actually using it to get to positive outcomes, like growth or forgiveness.
And the stakes just feel so much higher in these relationships, don't they?
Oh, definitely.
Your closest bonds, friendships, dating, partners, marriage, there's just more commitment, more emotional weight, more history than, say, with someone you just know casually.
Exactly. And those deeper layers, they influence everything.
Yeah.
How we see a disagreement, how we respond, or maybe don't respond, and what the final result is.
Yeah.
The sources we looked at, they cover a real range. Some focus on specific groups. Others highlight the tricky parts of actually studying something this complex.
So where does it all start? The research really points towards our earliest experiences kind of setting the stage, specifically being exposed to family verbal aggression when we were kids.
This is where it gets really interesting. The research defines verbal aggression pretty clearly. It's language used deliberately to attack someone's self-concept.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's destructive, and crucially, it's incredibly harmful, especially during childhood.
And if a child is around that kind of really severe verbal stuff frequently, they might develop something. Is it called desensitization?
Yes, exactly. It's like the brain and body, they develop this kind of adaptive response, almost like turning down the volume.
Okay.
They start to dampen their reaction to intense emotional or verbal conflict as a way to cope, just to get through it. And this numbing, it can lead to less emotional or even physiological responsiveness to conflict cues later on in adulthood.
So this childhood thing isn't just a bad memory. It can literally change how an adult reacts to, like, a heated argument.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Studies show clear links between that childhood exposure and things like, well, how acceptable adults think verbal aggression is.
Wow.
And even how their bodies respond physically, stress hormone levels, that sort of thing when they're actually in a conflict situation. The roots really do run deep. It shapes our automatic reactions years later.
Okay, so moving from those deep roots to the everyday arguments we face as adults, a common pattern the research talks about is serial arguments.
Ah, yes. Serial arguments, that frustrating cycle where you find yourselves arguing about the same basic issue again and again.
Yes, never quite solving it.
Exactly. And a frequent partner to serial arguments is the demand-withdrawal pattern,
Right.
where one person is pushing, demanding to talk about the issue, and the other person just avoids it or shuts down,
Yeah.
withdraws.
Yeah, that sounds not great for the relationship.
Generally, no. It's usually not a recipe for health. But there was a really surprising finding about this, tied to people's fundamental beliefs about relationships.
Oh, tell me more.
Yes, this was fascinating. The study looked at whether, positive beliefs could offer some kind of protection against these negative patterns.
Okay.
And they found that people who strongly believed in a soulmate theory, that their partner was uniquely meant for them,
Right.
they actually experienced less demand-withdrawal conflict and less stress related to that specific pattern.
Huh.
And here's the kicker. This was especially true for people who tended to be the ones resisting bringing up the argument issue in the first place.
Wow. Okay, that feels backwards somehow. You'd think believing in a soulmate might make conflict feel worse, like a sign things are wrong, leading to more stress or demanding.
It does seem that way at first glance, doesn't it? But maybe that deep-seated belief provides a kind of bedrock security. If you truly believe this person is your soulmate, perhaps you approach conflict with a different kind of underlying confidence. Or maybe you interpret their withdrawal less negatively, especially if you're someone who prefers to avoid confrontation anyway.
So our core beliefs might act as a quiet buffer. Interesting.
It suggests they can, yeah, against those negative loops.
Okay, thinking about difficult conversations, the research also touched on talking about sexual discrepancies in relationships. That sounds like a tricky area.
It is, and it's very, very common in romantic partnerships. Differences in desire, attitudes, preferred activities. It's just a reality for many couples.
Right.
One study looked specifically at how women navigated communicating about these differences.
And what kinds of issues came up when they tried to talk about it? What did they report?
Well, common themes were things like having to bring up the topic repeatedly because their partner would sort of avoid the conversation,
Mm,
or feeling like their partner wasn't really accommodating their needs or requests around it.
okay. And what strategies did they say they used to try and make those talks happen, or at least, manage the conflict?
They listed a whole range, actually. Everything from being strategic about timing, waiting for the right moment, quote unquote,
Yeah, I can imagine.
to careful word choice, using I statements instead of blaming language, giving positive feedback first before raising the issue, actively trying to avoid blame,
Makes sense.
and sometimes, yeah, using less direct methods, like physical excuses, oh, I have a headache, or just sort of accommodating the partner's desires to prevent a fight or cool things down.
That mix of really careful, intentional strategies and then also the more indirect or accommodating ones, it really highlights how difficult that topic can be.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's worth remembering, like the study authors pointed out, this kind of research often relies on self-report, people remembering things.
Right. Memory isn't perfect.
Exactly.
Mm.
And how people want to present themselves can shape it too. So
Yeah.
it gives us a window, but it's, a specific kind of window.
Gotcha. Okay, let's shift from those sensitive topics to more everyday conflicts that can still cause real tension, like who does what around the house, chores, especially in married couples. The research looked at conflict avoidance here.
Right. And avoidance in the context of domestic labor can look like a couple of things, either actively dodging the discussion when it starts,
Yep.
or just withholding complaints entirely, like never even bringing up something that bothers you.
And it seems like certain beliefs, certain ways of thinking drive that avoidance.
Absolutely. The research found specific beliefs tied to avoiding housework conflict for both husbands and wives.
Like what?
Things like believing, look, arguing about this won't actually change anything.
Okay, a sense of futility.
Yeah. Or it's just easier and faster to do it myself than have a whole conversation about it.
The path of least resistance.
Right. Or even feeling like housework just isn't a big enough or worthy topic to actually have a conflict over.
That idea that housework isn't worthy of conflict,
Yeah.
that feels connected to older ideas about home versus work, doesn't it?
It really does. There's this historical context, this idea of the home as a private sphere separate from the public world where you negotiate or, bargain.
Right.
And that legacy can make disagreements about who scrubs the toilet feel somehow inappropriate or trivial, like something you shouldn't have to argue about.
And trying to study that, especially the withheld complaints, that must be incredibly hard. How do you even measure silence or something that doesn't happen?
That's a huge methodological challenge the researchers acknowledge. It's way harder to study a complaint that's never voiced compared to observing an argument that actually occurs.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move from the laundry room to the digital world. How is
Right.
technology, texting, social media, all that part of conflict now?
Technology-mediated communication, or TMC. It's definitely woven into how we argue now.
Right.
It can be used for conflict, like starting an argument via text, or it can actually show up during a face-to-face argument.
You might think maybe TMC could be helpful sometimes, like gives you time to think, phrase things carefully, maybe remove some of the emotional nonverbal stuff that escalates things.
That's the potential, yeah.
Mm.
But a study looking at how people actually use TMC while they're in a face-to-face conflict found, well, a different picture.
Oh, how so?
They used it for things like just habitual checking, reflexively glancing at their phone mid-argument.
Guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or trying to manage their own emotions, like distracting themselves,
Mhm.
looking up information related to the argument, deliberately avoiding the other person by focusing on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
even involving other people, like texting a friend about the fight while it's happening,
Whoa.
or continued the conflict later via text, trying to maintain privacy if other people are around, or, in some cases, conducting the entire conflict just through tech.
So less about crafting the perfect response, more about coping with the difficult moment itself.
Seems like it, often. And the research noticed something interesting. Sometimes specific topics get discussed only via TMC, or only face-to-face.
Mm.
And that division might actually say something about the closeness or seriousness of the relationship, maybe reserving the really deep or sensitive stuff for in-person.
Let's talk about power dynamics for a minute. They're always there in relationships, right? Even if we don't talk about them openly.
Power is absolutely fundamental, foundational to relationship dynamics and how conflict plays out. The sources touched on something called dependence power.
Dependence power. Okay, what's that?
It's basically about how committed you are to the relationship and, crucially, how many alternatives you feel you have outside of it.
Right.
So if you're super committed and feel like you don't have many other options, you have lower dependence power. If you're less committed, more options, you have higher dependence power.
And having more or less of this dependence power can actually shift how you see problems in the relationship.
Yes, it can bias your perceptions. It's fascinating. Individuals with lower dependence power, so highly committed, few alternatives. They might tend to see their partner's annoying habits or issues as, well, less severe.
Huh. Minimizing.
Kind of. While at the same time seeing their own mistakes or misdeeds as more significant, it's like your level of dependence recalibrates your judgment.
Okay. And there was a study using a specific model, actor partner or something, that looked at this power dynamic with complaint avoidance.
Yes, the actor-partner interdependence model, or AP. It's a neat way to see how one person's traits, like their power, affect both their own behavior and their partner's behavior.
Got it.
And the key finding on complaint avoidance in heterosexual couples was really striking. Dependence power seemed to work differently for men and women.
How so?
For women, having more dependence power, meaning lower commitment, more alternatives was linked to less complaint avoidance. They spoke up more.
Okay.
But for men, having more dependence power was linked to more complaint avoidance. They tended to hold back more.
Wow, wait. So more power makes women more likely to voice complaints, but makes men less likely.
That's what this particular study suggested, yeah. And even more interestingly, a man's higher dependence power was also linked to his female partner avoiding complaints more.
Whoa. Okay, that's complex.
It really is. It points to maybe some real differences in what power means subjectively or how it translates into behavior for men versus women in this context. And it also hints that power and communication, they aren't static. They probably influence each other back and forth over time.
Okay, shifting gears a bit to family systems. The research also looked at conflict between parents and adolescents. Do we see their same demand-withdraw patterns there too?
Yes, that pattern definitely shows up in parent-teen dynamics as well. The study found that when adolescents use demanding behavior, it was linked pretty strongly to their own experience of negative emotions during the conflict.
Okay, that makes sense. They feel bad when they're pushing.
Right. But interestingly, it wasn't linked in the same way for the mother's emotions. Also, both the teen demanding and the mother withdrawing behaviors were negatively associated with the mother's belief that the conflict could actually be resolved.
So the teen demanding makes the teen feel bad. And both the teen demanding and the mom shutting down make the mom feel like, ugh, this is hopeless. We can't solve this.
That seems to be the dynamic suggested by the findings. It could be about power differences or maybe different goals in the conversation. Demanding might just be less effective or more frustrating for a teen.
One really fascinating method used in this family research was called video recall. What did that technique uncover?
Video recall is pretty cool. You record a family talking about a conflict.
Okay.
Then, afterward, you play the video back to each person individually and ask them, what were you thinking right here? What were you feeling at this moment? It gives you a window into their private internal world during the conflict.
Ah, like the stuff they don't say out loud.
Exactly. And a really compelling insight was how often adolescents revealed feeling caught in the middle of their parents' issues or tension, even if they didn't express that feeling at all during the actual recorded discussion.
And seeing their child say that during the recall, that must have been incredibly powerful for the parents.
Absolutely. The research mentioned it sometimes led to parents feeling pretty guilty.
I bet.
Video recall also highlighted that often both parents and kids felt a lack of communication efficacy. Like they just didn't feel confident or effective in how they were trying to talk about tough stuff. And another big thing, kids were often way more perceptive of their parents' conflict and moods than the parents realized, even if the kids were acting like they weren't paying attention.
Kids pick up on everything, don't they?
They really do.
Okay, so all of this, it really points to the huge impact conflict can have, especially when it's handled poorly. The research made a strong case for its effects on our actual health.
This is such a critical takeaway. Poorly managed conflict in our closest relationships. It poses a real, tangible threat to both physical and mental well-being.
Physically? How so?
Well, it activates biological stress pathways. Hostile interactions, think criticism, defensiveness, contempt. They're linked to increased stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol.
The fight or flight.
Yeah, exactly. And chronic activation of that system has long-term effects. Elevated stress responses during conflict, they've been shown to predict negative relationship outcomes like divorce later on.
Wow.
And they're linked to actual health problems, things like cardiovascular issues.
Yeah.
Also, chronic inflammation, part of the body's immune response that's tied to hostile conflict behavior too. It can even impair how well your body heals itself, like wounds healing slower.
So conflict literally keeps your system on high alert, wearing it down.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But the research also hinted at something potentially positive, a sort of protective physical effect.
Oh.
Yeah, this is intriguing. They found that engaging in more cognitive processing during the conflict, like really thinking through what's happening, trying to understand, and actively working to minimize hostility, were associated with anti-inflammatory effects.
So how we engage matters biologically, too.
It suggests it does. It's not just that we fight, but how we fight.
And the link between family conflict and mental health seems just as strong, maybe even more obvious.
Oh, it's profound. Very strong, very well-established connection. Longitudinal studies tracking people over time consistently show that kids growing up in families with lots of conflict or parental divorce have a significantly higher risk for various mental health challenges later.
Like depression, anxiety.
Exactly. Depression, anxiety, behavioral problems, substance use issues, the list goes on.
Is that related back to that idea of sensitization?
Yes, that's believed to be a key mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
The sensitization hypothesis basically suggests that repeated exposure to hostile conflict, especially when you're young, can make you more emotionally reactive overall.
Okay.
More prone to blaming yourself when things go wrong, more skeptical about whether problems can even be solved. And this vulnerability can unfortunately pave the way for mental health problems down the road.
And it's not just kids, right? This affects adults, too.
Absolutely. Chronic entanglement in conflict is clearly linked to mental health issues in adults as well. Depression, anxiety, it takes a toll.
It really underscores that old idea of the mind and body being separate is just false.
Completely false. The emotional distress from conflict, that feeling of being constantly criticized or facing hostility, it isn't just in your head. It has real, measurable consequences for both your mental and your physical health. It impacts the whole person.
So, given how damaging conflict can be, finding ways to repair relationships after harm seems absolutely essential. The research points to forgiveness as a critical process here.
Forgiveness, yes. It's presented not just as an internal feeling, but as a relational process.
Okay, what does that mean, relational process?
It involves several steps, usually. Acknowledging that a harm actually happened.
Right, not denying it.
Right. Then making a conscious choice to extend undeserved mercy or grace, essentially letting go of the right to retaliate or hold on to resentment. Then there's usually a psychological shift, moving from negative feelings like anger or bitterness towards more positive ones regarding the person who caused the harm.
Okay.
And often it involves renegotiating the meaning or the nature of the relationship moving forward, which might lead to reconciliation, but forgiveness and reconciliation aren't always the same thing. You can forgive someone without fully reconciling.
That's an important distinction. What motivates people to forgive, especially when it's really hard?
Motivations can vary a lot. A strong desire to repair the relationship and reconcile is a big one.
Sure.
Fear of losing the relationship entirely can be another motivator, or even a perceived obligation to forgive. You see this sometimes in relationships you don't choose, like family ties, parent-child bonds.
The sources also talked about conditional forgiveness, forgiving but with strings attached. What were the reasons behind that?
Yeah, one study looked specifically at the motives for using conditional forgiveness. They found a few key themes. People used it sometimes to restore or uphold moral standards, like saying, okay, I can forgive, but I need you to know that lying is not acceptable.
Setting boundaries.
Exactly. Or to clarify needs and expectations moving forward. I need to show them how serious I was about needing X, Y, or Z in this relationship.
Makes sense.
Also for self-protection or partner protection, maybe to feel safer, or to deliberately slow down the reconciliation process until trust feels more rebuilt.
Right.
And underlying a lot of it was often that overarching desire for reconciliation. Someone might say, I put conditions on my forgiveness because I really wanted my marriage to work, but I felt I needed to see real change first.
So conditions aren't always about punishment. Sometimes they're actually a strategy to try and make the relationship viable or safe again.
That's a really key insight, yeah. Conditional forgiveness can be this complex negotiation,
Yeah.
often driven by a desire to find some path forward, even if things aren't fully healed yet.
But studying forgiveness must be tricky, too.
Oh, definitely. The research acknowledges the challenges. It's often a very private, internal process. And studies often rely on people recalling major past events, major transgressions,
Right.
which might not capture the more subtle, maybe everyday acts of forgiveness and letting go that happen all the time.
And that's where different methods could help, like diaries or getting data from both people involved.
Exactly. Things like experience sampling, daily diaries, or collecting data from both partners could give a much richer, more nuanced picture of how forgiveness actually unfolds in real time.
So wrapping all this up, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive into the research?
I think it really shows just how incredibly layered and, frankly, how impactful conflict communication is in our closest relationships. It's huge.
Yeah.
From the echoes of our childhood experiences, the way they might sort of predispose us,
Yeah.
to the specific dynamics we fall into, like those serial arguments or the demand-withdrawal pattern. How we navigate disagreements profoundly shapes our connections, our well-being.
And our physical health, as we saw.
And even our physical health, absolutely.
We've seen how those really sensitive topics demand such careful navigation, how even everyday stuff like chores can become major conflict points, how technology is just increasingly woven into it all, and the fundamental role forgiveness plays in trying to repair bonds when harm inevitably happens. It really does make you think about the patterns in your own life, your own relationships, doesn't it?
It truly does. And, here's where it gets really interesting to think about. Given everything we've discussed, the clear and significant impact that conflict communication has on both physical and mental health.
Yeah.
Could a deeper, more widespread understanding of these dynamics, like the kind of insights we've explored today, could that actually be seen as a matter of public health?
Huh. Like teaching better conflict skills is a public health initiative.
Potentially. Something to mull over.